Welcome to Tales with Preshpen.
Ruby, now 12, began to understand a new kind of pain, not rejection, but replaced. She wasn't just the child he didn't want. She was the one who came before the joy. Sometimes, the boys would call her sister and run to her with sticky hands and toothless grins. She would smile softly, carry them, play with them even, but inside a quiet ache grew. She didn't hate them, but she couldn't help but wonder, why was it so easy for her father to love them? Why did they unlock something in him that she never could? Her mother, now glowing with the pride of birthing sons, began to soften, but not toward Ruby. Her joy came from being accepted again. From the neighbors who now called her Mama the Boys with admiration. Ruby watched her mother laugh more, talk more, wear brighter wrappers, and sing quietly while cooking. She was glad her mother could smile again. But there was a small part of her that whispered, "So I was the reason she stopped smiling? Was my birth a curse she had to recover from?" She learned to fold her feelings neatly, like laundry. Smile when spoken to, disappear when not needed, stay useful, stay quiet. At night, she would look up at the zinc roof and ask questions she never voiced aloud. "If I was a boy, would you have loved me, Baba? If I died today, would you cry?" And still, the answer was silence. But even in that silence, something else had started growing inside her. Not hate, not revenge, but a fire. A soft, stubborn fire. The kind that doesn't scream, but waits. By the time Ruby turned 16, she had learned how to carry pain like a second skin, invisible to most, but always there, always tight against her spirit. She moved like water, calm, quiet, but deep. She spoke little at home, but her notebooks were full of thoughts, questions, wounds, and quiet dreams written in pencil between maths problems and borrowed essay lines. Words became her escape, her weapon, her therapy. She didn't know when it began exactly, but classmates started listening when she spoke in class. There was something in her voice not loud, not showy, but heavy with something real. People leaned in. Teachers started calling on her to explain things. Debate club noticed her, then literary club. One day during interschool debate, she stood before a crowd for the first time. Her topic was, "Does one's background determine one's future?" She stood there in her secondhand school uniform, voice steady, heart pounding, and began, "My name is Ruby. I was born into a room with no space for me, but I found space in myself. Pain is not a prison, unless you decide to stay there." The room fell silent. When she finished, people clapped, not politely, but with something close to awe. Her principal called her name afterward and said, "You speak like someone older than your age." "It's because pain ages people," she replied without thinking. That day changed her life. One invitation became 2, then 5, then 15, NGOs. Youth programs, women's conferences. They invited her to speak. She told the truth each time, not as a victim, but as a survivor. She shared her story not to gain pity, but to free others. "I am proof that being unloved doesn't mean being unworthy. You don't have to come from a palace to speak like a queen. You are not what your father failed to see." Her words began to travel further than her pain ever had. And then came him. At a youth summit where she spoke, he was the photographer. After her session, while she packed her bag, he came to her and said, "Your voice shook something in me." She laughed. "Good or bad? It reminded me not to waste time pretending not to feel." His name was Taylor. He didn't rush, didn't push. He showed up, over and over. He listened to the pauses in her voice more than the sentences. He saw her silences and didn't try to fix them, just held them gently. Ruby had never known love that felt like breathing, quiet, natural, constant. But with Taylor, love wasn't fireworks. It was sunlight always there, even behind the clouds. He made her feel like she mattered, like she was enough, like being born a girl had never been a mistake. Years later, when they stood under a simple canopy and said their vows, Ruby's voice cracked when she said, "I spent years thinking love wasn't for me, until you looked at me like I was made of something sacred." Taylor whispered back, "You are." And when her first book was published, Born of Him, loved by none, people cried. Not just for her story, but for their own. Because she had turned her scars into scripture, her wounds into windows, and she proved finally fully. Being unwanted didn't stop her from becoming unforgettable. The compound hadn't changed. The same rust-stained buckets sat by the tap. Children still ran barefoot between rooms, shouting over the crackling of someone's radio. The air still smelled of smoke, palm oil, and old water. But Ruby had changed. Now 27, she stood tall in her flowing dress, hair wrapped neatly, her eyes sharp yet soft. Her presence didn't demand attention, it commanded it. She hadn't been home in years. Not since her wedding. But today she came. Morgan was sitting outside, his walking stick resting against the wall, his knees bent, his eyes duller than she remembered. He looked up slowly when he heard her sandals, paused. "Ruby?" She nodded. "Good afternoon, sir." The word sir hung heavy between them, polite, distant, cold. He looked at her fully for the first time in maybe ever. There was no anger in her eyes, no bitterness, just something heavier, understanding. She sat beside him on the wooden bench. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence wasn't awkward. It was just full, of things never said, of years past, of a childhood wasted. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I heard you now speak on television. They say you even went to Kenya to talk." She nodded again. "Yes, I speak." Another silence. "You've done well," he muttered. Ruby turned to him slowly. "I did what I had to do, to survive." His lips parted, but no words came. How do you apologize for a wound that started before the child could speak? For birthdays forgotten, moments missed, for never holding your own daughter like she belonged. So he didn't say sorry, he only said, "You've become someone." And that somehow was the closest thing he'd ever offered her as praise. She stood. "I didn't come for validation. I came to say I forgive you." He looked up, startled. "You do?" "Yes, not because you earned it, but because I need it." Then, with the calmness of someone who no longer begged to be seen, she added, "But I'm not your broken little girl anymore. I'm the woman I built from the pieces you left behind." As she walked out of the compound, children ran past her, shouting. Some waved. A neighbor smiled. And in the distance, she saw her husband leaning against their car, holding their daughter, a girl named Loveth. Ruby smiled. Her father never gave her love, but she gave it to herself. And now she gave it freely to others. Not because of where she came from, but because of who she chose to become.